I love these things where they're teaching boys to talk about how they feel about something. They don't have them. You're just teaching them to lie about feelings. That's why women shouldn't teach boys after third or fourth grade. Desires and protestations to the contrary, it's a fairly small number of men that can fully mature. The women that get there seem to be women who have large families, and where they get to is not interfering with the order that men establish. Simply can't adapt, which is the big problem with the feminine mind, is that you can't reason with it because it's intentionally non-adaptive. And for good reason, evolutionary reasons. So the problem you get into there is that the major trade between those who have and those who don't is resource for behavior. And so what we eliminated in our society is all the layers of exchanging resource protection and insurance for behavior. So we deregulated behavior. The enemy, so to speak, along with the female intuition, they're fostering infantilization by the deregulation of behavior in an effort to avoid the cost of personal behavioral adaptation, which means continuous adulting, in other words, growing the capacity for agency. Look at all these women. They want zero responsibility, zero accountability, maximum consumption, least long-term thinking, greatest appeal to moving with the herd. They want to minimize any self-regulation and adaptation. Okay. Well, that's not all of them, but it's more than a third. If you take a woman and you give her 5 kids and a husband she can count on, she'll be conservative. If a woman is running with the herd, she's going to be left. She has no responsibilities, and it's gloriously rewarding to her to not have that. Except the reason she has her feelings is so that she can tolerate the demands. I mean, if you have kids, the cognitive burden of just trying to keep track of what your kids are doing while you're still doing something else. And, you've always got to be, what is it up to? 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 Oh, what's going to happen if that happens? Who's going to be offended by this? If this will get broken, whatever. That cacophony is in a woman's mind. Guys are like, I need to break it with a rock. We're working a drawer at a time. So they have to use that empathy to imagine the mind of all these children that are running around. And that they're stuck in a world of other women who are doing the same, who are then going to gameplay other women because that's their method of gameplay.
The issue goes like this to the lefties. The patriarchy is not going away. Negotiate with it.
Let me put it another way.
Okay.
What a woman is really saying is, I don't want to self-regulate. I want to export my costs onto others because I have the privilege of not having children. And so I have the privilege of having this intuition, these instincts, and the value of my fertility is the equivalent of male violence. And so I'm going to use it for antisocial purposes. The same reason men can use their violence for antisocial purposes. Start saying men and women are relatively equal in these trait distributions. No, they're not. They're not equal in the expression of those trait distributions. Women will be aesthetic and men will be organized, right? Ordered. The same thing will be with intelligence tests. They measure what's similar instead of what's different, except what's different is what causes all the meaning. In other words, that's what allows evolutionary computation. It allows us to specialize. So the whole idea of searching for equality is actually the wrong answer. The academy is based on the wrong answer. Instead, what are our differences and therefore what are the compromises? Instead of what should we all gear toward as individual mechanical pieces? It's the Industrial Revolution writ large. What is the feminine mind? The Industrial Revolution, it's the same thing. What is the masculine mind? The masculine mind is I need a spectrum of people to fill these niches, and it needs to work in a hierarchy so that we have the least cost of maneuver in real time.
The premise of this, it's like this. So you got this polarization, male and feminine, and the university is tending to obscure the distinction, the difference, which makes the trade impossible.
Women are mediocratizing the polity. Women need to mediocratize the community. The women need to make sure we're trying to keep it all on a social level, and they're trying to make their families raise within that. But men have to produce adversarial competition. So what we're seeing is not only bad, it's horrifically bad. This whole search for equality rather than truth, equality at the cost of dumbing down men and increasing the aggression of women. is actually horrible. Whereas what we want is to find the extremes of men and women, learn the spectrum, and then consider the ladder of trades that have to occur in order to make everybody fulfill their part on the computational spectrum. But what's always going to happen is men are always at the fringes. Even if it's nothing more than we're 10% bigger. We're 10% bigger, our brains are 10% bigger, but that 5% only matters when you say on averages. When you look at the extremes, there just aren't any women up here. Even when I listen to the smartest women alive, which I know some of them, I mean, I don't know them personally, but I know their work, it's still what we would call empirical, not theoretical. There are no women up there. Why? Because the women's mind is what we consider verbal and its permutation. So even the way women do math is verbal. They're pictorial. It's why Einstein failed. But then the men's mind aren't. We do systems, things that are moving in space and time. And so we model things. There's no women up there. There's just none. You'd think that after a century of trying to find one, we would.
It's okay.
So that's what I want to say is it's not about authority and oppression. It's just a scale of competency where there's just going to be more men at those extremes. Like the best female lawyer in the country doesn't argue legal facts. She doesn't argue the law. She argues the judges. This is the thing. So when you say patriarchy, I don't really like that term because it's like men know better. That's not the answer. At the largest scale of population time, it's all males. That's what it means. I'm not into this women are bad, men are good. We have a role to play in evolutionary computation. If you've ever been in a dorm full of guys, it's very different from a dorm full of girls. You get different behaviors from the sexes when they're separated and then when they're together. And you get different behaviors, the size of those populations. Now, women are pretty good at keeping each other down.
Yep.
That's what they do. It's henpecking. And then they let loose the mean girls on behalf of the not mean girls. So women keep each other down. They keep men down. There's a value in keeping men down because you don't want the alphas screwing every chick and the rest of the guys, and you're basically a slave. They get chased out of 100 countries. They're just like women. They ignore their history. The female economy is actually a thing. They're running an economy of non-conflict. And males are running an economy of competition and conflict because we can bear conflict and the women can't. In history, the boys go to the men when they're 13 or 14, and it's a clear demarcation. But the girls, they just continue on this line that they've been from children, and all of a sudden they've got younger sisters and brothers, and they've got their own children along with their sisters, and this whole chain continues. But women never get to the point where they have to scale and systematize because they were never able to work on, organize around, focus or function in the place where we are actually turning from the economy of care to the economy of violence and force.
There you go. I think it has to do with social scales. What is known as the patriarchy is outside of that intuitive scale of the feminine. As soon as you have an aggregation of people that exceeds the capacity of that feminine social operating system to scale, you must have a patriarchy because the dudes are organizing it.
Let me put it another way. Once you're an adult, you're fucking dangerous and you need regulation. That's why there's a patriarchy. And the women think that they can make that happen by scaling the community method of organizing. What they do, of course, when they do, is they destroy the adversarial competitive ability of the males at scale. This is why I'm so concerned about women having their own house of government. I'm not like one of these guys that say, well, barefoot, pregnant, out of the workforce, and quiet in the house. I see the value of women having access to scaling resources and their benefit. I get that. I just want a house because we had this church and these norms and these economic necessities and these reproductive and resource constraints that kept women bound. It was a normative economy with a little religious and legal constraint on extremes. But now we've got this ability to create via positiva institutions that assist women in medical care, childbirth, and in education, whatever. So we've got this ability to produce these because we're so wealthy. Well, great. But let's make it a trade.